Welcome to Intermezzo number 3. As explained before, these intermezzos are shorter videos, more ad hoc, more off the cuff, dealing with current issues, something in the news or something that is happening, more broadly speaking, and they're posted in the middle of the month, in between the major episodes of the Hic Sunt podcast. So for today, I was thinking of talking a little bit about European defense, in the sense of the fact that the European countries have now, or are now, in an important moment in their history, in the sense of building their own defensive structures, their own independent, self-standing military capacity, and so on. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. And it is a major change. So I think it's worth talking a little bit about this as a sort of a marker, historical marker, to pay attention, because usually we don't notice things when they're happening. We always, sort of underline them retroactively when we look back in history. Well, this was an important moment, but it's important to see and to mark such moments when they happen. And also because this short video is a sort of a coda or an addendum to the previous major episode of the podcast that dealt with de Gaulle, because it kind of connects, and I mentioned this issue in that full episode as well. So what do I mean, and what is this about? The world order that we inhabit today, right, was mostly developed in the 20th century, and especially after the Second World War. And since the Second World War, the European countries, and I'm referring until 1989 to Western Europe, of course, but now the entire Europe, have been in a state of, let's put it this way, slumber from the point of view of developing their own military capacities and initiative and action. Why? Because contrary to what went before, in the sense that for most of Western history, Europe was the center of the world politically and militarily. In the 20th century, especially after World War II, that changed radically. The Western European countries lost their empires, and new superpowers emerged, which at that point were the United States and the Soviet Union. So we lived in a bipolar world. And so basically the world was, as you well know, divided into, West and East, broadly speaking. And the West was centered around one important power, superpower, which was the United States. And the European countries, and this was an order that the United States wanted. Yeah, it wanted this order, it preferred this order, because having the Western, sort of the democratic, liberal democratic countries ordered around you as the center of power gives you huge advantages, right? It also gives you responsibilities, right? But it also gives you authority. It gives you power, in the sense of the fact that you have a whole developed world working with you, strong allies, both economically and militarily, and you sort of lead that, leader of the free world. They talk about, people talk about the American president as being the leader of the free world, but not anymore. Yeah, not anymore. And this is where I want to get. And in this period, post World War II, because of this umbrella of protection, and especially in the nuclear world order, this umbrella of protection to a large degree was the nuclear protection defense that the US offered to the Western European countries against, at that time, the Soviet Union. The Western European countries, most of them, with to a degree, the exception of France, right, and this is where de Gaulle comes into play, sort of fell into a sort of a historical slumber, in the sense that they were comfortable in this protection because they had this safety net. Yeah, they had this umbrella of safety. And in a way, the consciousness of the collective consciousness, or the political culture of these Western European states changed, in the sense that they sort of started feeling as if, this is the normal state of the world, that that we are okay, there's the Cold War, but we are safe. Yeah. So this safety, which was guaranteed by the United States, and again, the United States had huge advantages from this, obviously. So this safety put them into a state of a slumber. And you've heard, we've heard a lot of complaints from the United States since the 90s that were directed at Western European states, saying that they should pick up sort of their slack. Yeah, they should pick up their the charge as well, themselves as well. They should contribute more to the collective defense and so on. But it's very hard to have it both ways, right? You either want them to be capable and effective and powerful on their own, and then in that case they don't depend on you and you lose all your benefits, or they depend to a degree on you. Now, it's true, there's a third way, right? And the third way would be the best way. The third way would be for within the NATO umbrella, for the European countries to sort of pick up the slack and play a much more active role. But it's a hard balance to have. It's a hard balance to have because, again, the United States has been benefiting immensely from the fact that it has this horde of allies, and they reciprocally benefit in all ways, as I said, economically, militarily, and so on. But this all, so this was the sort of the collective consciousness, the political culture in Western Europe. And I said slumber because, when you live under a specific umbrella of protection, then you change your understanding of the world, and you sort of, as I said, have the sense or the sensation that the world is safe, and then your thinking changes, your policies change, and so on. But the world is not safe, and you do need to have military capacity, whether of your own or someone else to offer it to you, to be safe. Yeah. So the world is a dangerous place. It doesn't mean that it's a state of continuous warfare or conflict, but it is a dangerous place. And this sort of comfortable slumber is it's like a spoiled child. Yeah. In the sense that or let me put it this way, a child that grows up in a very comfortable, in very comfortable circumstances, in very comfortable conditions. That child is not ready to face the world often and to a large degree. If he or she has not been faced with the world as it is, if you have been overly protected, then you don't develop the tools, the skills, and the abilities to survive actually in the world when that protection ends. And this has been the status quo. We have to understand for what? Since World War II, so let's say about 75 years. But this changed radically due to two factors. One was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which basically ended the post-World War II arrangement, the liberal arrangement, because it was for the first time when such a grievous breach of sovereignty has happened since in Europe, and by a major state since World War II, since the formation of the UN. But it also was one of the major. It was the first major threat to European security in post-World War II history. Now, the conflicts in former Yugoslavia also were a breach of this sense of security and history of security since World War II in Europe, but not to the same degree. Because we have to understand, for most of history, Europe has been war after war after war. It has been characterized by relentless war. So this period of post-World War II peace is unique in European history, truly unique, because European history has been characterized by continuous warfare. So the first breach was of this European security and peace and stability was constituted by the conflicts in former Yugoslavia. But as I said, they were it was in a way a civil war, right? Because there were conflicts between the former components of Yugoslavia. So it wasn't. It led to secession and the formation of new states, but it wasn't basically initially an interstate war. Now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was an interstate war, and is an interstate war. So it's a major break with this history of comfort, and the European states did not respond well to this challenge, nor did the United States, by the way, right? Because we need to remember that the whole invasion started with the invasion in Georgia in what was it, 2008, 2006, yeah? So that was the first major breach of the post-World War II sort of status quo on behalf of Russia, the Russian Federation. So the first time the Russian Federation did that after World War II after 1989, basically, after the end of the Soviet Union. So neither the United States nor Europe, the European states, reacted as they should have to that breach. Basically, they tried to pretend it didn't happen. And let's remember the famous reset button of the Secretary of State of the United States at that time, Hillary Clinton, in what was it, 2008, 2010, goes to Russia and with Lavrov has this huge red button bought at Home Depot, and to symbolize a reset of relationships. Reset how? Because Russia did not change its policy. So it was wishful thinking. Same the Western European states, or the European states, because we can talk about the whole of Europe since 1989, did not react accordingly. They continued to even to have basically to depend on Russia for, as we well know, for gas, oil, and so on, to become not just have economic relationships, but to depend on Russia, which is, if you have an enemy, putting yourself in a situation of dependence towards them is the stupidest thing you can do, right? Pardon my French. But it was wishful thinking on behalf of the entire Western world. Well, because there was no reaction, what followed was the invasion of Crimea and taking over Crimea and Donbass and so on, up to the full invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So basically, the Western European states had 15 years to sort of wake up and smell the not so pleasant roses of the fact that the world is a dangerous place. But then 2022 was a sort of an existential shock, and even then, one could argue, and I'm very much on the same side or same position here as the countries from Central and Eastern Europe, like Poland or the Baltic states, who were complaining that even after 2022, although there was this sort of existential shock, the Western countries still did not react as they should have. But then came the second mandate of President Trump, which brought with it a sort of all kinds of policies that constituted another existential shock for the Western European states. Because it's one thing to ask from the European states to pick up the slack within NATO, which should be, yeah, and to sort of act more consciously and conscientiously as important actors according to their economic force in providing security, in providing military force and so on, and things were going that way, but that's one thing, and that has been said since Clinton and so on. They have been asking European states to do that, and it's if the Trump administration would have said that, and it continued to say that, that's okay, but that wasn't it, and that was it. The existential shock was not caused by the Trump administration saying such things, which everybody sort of said, even if they didn't really do it, but basically turning against Europe. I'm not saying here in terms of criticism, but in terms of becoming an actual security threat to Europe, with the famous plans or hints or statements about annexing Greenland, which is crazy. Yeah, which is basically, you have to understand, the whole Western alliance was built as well. It's us versus them, and at the center of it is the United States, and there's this dimension also that the Western states trust in the United States. I mean, just because a country has whatever military economic power, you don't form an alliance around them. Nobody's forming alliances around China, because it might have military power or economic power to a degree, but that it lacks another important part, which is soft power. Soft power, which actually is the basis of hard power, of the effectiveness of hard power. Without soft power, hard power is not effective. And what is soft power is the fact that you have the capability to influence others without force, because others collaborate with you and work with you and listen to you because they trust you, and because furthermore they can consider you someone trustworthy, even a model, and they want you to take leadership. I mean, it's like, no regime can survive an entire population turning against it. So there needs to be a dimension of support there that is, even begrudged, right? On which rest even unfair regimes. I always say that the end of a regime is when life is unlivable. When you become when the regime doesn't offer a minimum of order and the capacity to earn a living, that's when it has lost all legitimacy, because people want at least that minimum, give us the protection that allows us to live. So all regimes, all power rests on a sort of that is lasting, that is effective, even if it has hard power of the military power and so on. Military power is nothing without soft power. Because military power, hard power, basically mobilizes everything that you have through soft power. When the United States was attacked at 9/11, that was the first and only time in history when NATO actually acted in support of one of its members. It wasn't the United States bailing out someone else. It was the other countries helping the United States, because the United States invoked Article 5 of the treaty, which is that when a state is attacked, all states are attacked in NATO, and they intervened, and the whole Afghanistan intervention was a NATO intervention. But that happened because, United States, no country can force a bunch of all other countries to do something long term. And this has been shown in Afghanistan with the United States. It has been shown now in Iran. You can win battles, but making an entire country behave in a certain way, that rests on soft power. And this action, this threats to Greenland, undermine the entire system in a most tragic and thorough and existential way. This is why it was an existential shock, because the center of this whole order suddenly, it's like, it's like someone from your family on whom everyone relies, the mother, the father, turning against the family, becoming a threat to the family. That is the end of the family, because it's the center of it, on which everything relied, on which everything was constructed. Through relationships of love, respect, and so on in the family, through soft power, through trust. And as I said, this whole system was a huge advantage for the United States, because it benefited economically, militarily, and so on. And this was shown now with the Iran intervention of the United States, that it had basically no allies to rely on. And the President Trump complained about this. Well, you can't do both. You can't punch your neighbor and then and threaten his life, and then wonder why he is not coming to help you fight the other neighbor. or extinguish the fire and so on. It doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work. This is the whole thing. This liberal world order, which has nothing to do with how the word is used in the United States with liberal and conservative. That's not what it means. The liberal world order is the order established in the 19th century based on human rights, individual liberty, and so on. Market economy, that's all liberalism. As I said, the word is many times the word is misused in American parlance, even now, even around the world as well. Liberalism is free market and individual initiative and human rights and equality before the law and other things. So the whole liberal order, right, was the alternative, and especially the one built after World War II with the UN, with security, with the guarantee of sovereignty and so on, was an alternative to what went before, which was a war of all against all, a system based on continued competition and conflict, which led to basically 2 world wars, and especially World War I. A system of continuous instability. But when you have continuous instability, you don't have international economy. You don't have globalization in the sense of international exchange, of travel internationally, of the fact that I can speak on and put my video on the internet and people around the world can see it. Everything, all of these things cross borders. All of the things we wear and buy are produced in various countries. Well, all of this doesn't just exist. And it didn't exist before. It's a result of this liberal order. And the reason why I mention this is because the choices are you either create a system based on rules, which allows then for us to cooperate, to have economic exchange, or a system based on competition and conflict where there's all of this economic exchange and everything ceases basically. Or it becomes extremely costly because you have tariffs and so on. Right? And barriers to trade. And everyone is trying to undermine the others instead of having a free trade and so on. Which again, things that we take as for granted. The fact that there is internet. There's no internet or world travel, safe travel and organized travel or exchanges and on and on and on. I can go on. Or the Eurovision or whatever, or the World Cup, yeah, in a system of instability. This is why interglobal sports came about only in the 20th century. Yeah, because they were impossible previously because the world was not cooperating. It's not. We have created a system of stability. Now, I say this because the same thing. What these 2 alternatives? You either have a sort of a continuous competition and conflict, or you have something similar to the liberal world order of based on rules and cooperation, which we have built, which doesn't exist naturally. Well, the same choices are within NATO. You either have NATO as a system in which of collective defense, yeah, in which everybody pays his dues and so on, and that's all fine. But if you turn against the members of this alliance, if they turn against each other, then all is done, all is gone, yeah, and then you lose all the benefits you had before, yeah. The benefits which were economic and so on, and the fact that suddenly the Trump administration discovered that you need air bases in Europe to go somewhere, that you need to refuel. I mean, things that are basic. This is why it's important to understand that the world that we as we have it now, all these benefits are not natural, and it's very easy to ruin them. And they were built by a generation marred and scarred by World War II and World War I and World War II, where they have tried to kill each other and they realize this is not, if we keep going this way, this is not a way to go. Yeah, this is not our future will be a disaster. Yeah, so they built this system of liberal world order because they tried the opposite. Yeah, so this is the context within which this was an existential shock, because the whole security architecture that was built after World War II was undermined. As I said, first by the Russian invasion, and two, by the erratic, I would say, policies of the current administration. And again, I need to repeat that neither I nor this podcast has any partisan affiliation or leanings and so on. I'm not for or against a particular person or party and so on. That's very, very clear. We're just analyzing things as they are. Of course, within a framework of values, so these were the two existential shocks that, and especially the second, these US policies coming after the first, that really pushed the European states, forced them to take steps. Because as I said, just after the Russian intervention, they promised things. The German chancellor at the time promised a sort of a major historical shift, but from saying it to actually radically internalizing, as I said, a changed understanding of the world, there's some way to go, because this is the difference. As I said, in the post-World War II period, there was a collective consciousness. There was a certain political culture in the West that was built on a certain softened understanding of the world, because you were under an umbrella of protection. To change radically that understanding, it takes some existential shocks, because it is an existential change, because it's a change in historical consciousness, in consciousness. So, and that's why this is an important moment to remark on, because what has happened and what is happening right now is such a change in consciousness, in political consciousness. And there's nothing more telling about this than the fact that recently, and I'm going to post the speech in there will be links to, as usually, to the web page of this podcast, where you can find sources and resources related to the topics discussed. Well, one of those links, one of those sources will be a link translated to the speech by President Macron of France earlier this year, in front and next to a nuclear submarine, a French nuclear submarine, by which he basically redefined the nuclear, or further refined and restated the nuclear policy of France. France is a nuclear power. Why? Well, back to de Gaulle. Check out the previous Hic Sunt full episode. And in that speech, he made it clear that France is ready to use its nuclear power, but it went further than that, and this is the major change. France has now offered, and it has been accepted, so it has signed agreements with a number of European states, in Scandinavia, Poland, other states in Europe, to offer its nuclear protection to them. And this is a huge change, because until now, because of the NATO alliance that was, functional, most Western European states, except for France, again back to de Gaulle and his policies of French, independence, although France is a member of NATO, all the other European states relied on the nuclear umbrella of the United States. But now, because of these existential shocks, they realize that they are vulnerable, and with a direct threat to the territory of European territory, right, as Greenland, they were forced to do so. Things that were unimaginable 10 years ago have become not just imaginable, but very clear and present, a clear and present danger, as the movie says. So now, this is a major shift that a number of European states have accepted, and France is offering its nuclear protection, which means what? Which means that if any of those states are attacked with the nuclear weapons, France will attack the attacker. And who did until now? This was part of the NATO arrangement, but it was mostly built on the US nuclear umbrella. Well, now the US is actually a threat. The US actually has become a threat, which is unbelievable. But again, it's not war as much as a threat, but it's as I said, it's erratic because there hasn't been a major change in U.S. foreign policy in the sense of a policy framework. It's just erratic governance. That's what it is. It's I mean, talking about Canada, your closest neighbor and ally, yeah, a pillar of North American, sort of existence, as potentially the 51st state. And now the Prime Minister of Canada gave some famous speeches about, again, breaking away from the United States and creating an alternative system of economic cooperation and of security. I'm going to link also his famous speech about that, right? But this is unimaginable. But it has no strategic. The problem is that there's no strategy behind this. What is the strategy? There's no strategy. Yeah. And the reason why I mentioned, it's like, the topic is European defense, European independent defense, building independent structures of defense and capabilities in Europe, but we keep talking about the United States. Well, because this is where everything really, as I said, the second most important existential shock, this is where it started from, so we need to understand this as well. But there's no strategy. And whoever comes next, especially if it's from the other party in the United States, but even if not, because this regime, this administration hasn't built a strategy, because what is the strategy? The strategy cannot be to, President Trump, as President Trump says, oh, I get along well with Putin. Well, that's not a strategy. Yeah, that's maybe a contextual arrangement, which could be useful or not useful. But just the other day, the President Trump tweeted something about, I always had okay relations with Kim Jong-un, the head of North Korea, so why should we spend so much effort on defending South Korea? That's not a strategy. That is not a strategy. That is a whim. That is I feel something. Strategy is something that you build for medium to long term, yeah? And what you act in the short term is the result of that medium to long term architecture. There is no architecture here. It's like, I got along with Jim Bob, so we should not do this. But that has huge implications. Weakening South Korea strengthens China. China is a strategic competitor of the United States. China, Russia, North Korea are enemies of the United States. Let's be very clear. Enemies, let me say it this way. But when I mention these countries, I don't mention, obviously this doesn't mean the population. I'm saying the current governments in these countries and the regimes and their strategic sort of posture is to be competitors, if not enemies of the United States. North Korea is an enemy of the United States because they declared that. It's not like, it's their choice. It's their whole strategy is built against, and their whole internal and external rhetoric is built by positing, the United States as the big enemy. It's a fact. It's not a good thing. We're not happy about this. But the world is what the world is. And unfortunately, that dictatorship there, this is what how they're running the government there. Yeah. Poor North Koreans have no choice in this. Yeah. So these are the realities. And saying that, well, we actually, I get along with them and we should have good relations is not a strategy. Whatever, but that's not the core topic here. So this sort of but all of these contributed to the fact that especially the Western European countries were the leaders. Again, I mentioned countries, I mean the leaders, I mean the administrations there, the current regimes there have been forced, and it's important, this word is important, that they have been forced to change to undergo a sort of an existential change, a change in their political, historical consciousness, a change in how they understand the world. And it is, in many ways, this is good. It's very bad for the stability and security of the world, very, very bad, in the sense that it is a result of instability, and instability is, the next step between peace and war. And that's not what we want. War is the worst thing in any case. But it's good in the sense that it was time. And it took these two existential shocks for them to truly change their understanding of the world, which then forces them to act accordingly, which then forces Europe, and this is the point, to at this point build not just its own security architecture, but also its own security capabilities, which means building, making weapons, creating weapons capabilities. By the way, Canada and Europe have signed an agreement to jointly do this, build their military capabilities in purchasing and production and so on, which is key, right? Because a lot of this was buying, you know, airplanes and whatever from US. Now they, and this is one of the consequences, right? If you alienate your friends, they won't buy from you. Yeah, and again, you're going to now then complain. Well, look at them; they're not buying from you. Well, yeah, because you threaten them. They're not, as I said, hard power rests on soft power. Anyway, so building their own military capabilities, sovereign military capabilities, independent, non-dependent military capabilities. This is a radical. This is a major change. This is a historical shift. Because it is a radical change from what has been happening since World War II for almost a century. Yeah, and as I said, it was worth sort of bringing this up and talking about this because usually things happen and we don't pay attention to them. But this is what's going on. This is what's going on. Of course, we don't know where it will go, but it is, as I said, there is a from a Central Eastern European perspective, with whom I agree, like countries like Poland, Romania, the Baltic states, you know, Czechia, and so on, who have been pushing for this, who have been telling the Western Europeans to wake up because, you know, they're neighboring Russia, these countries in Central Eastern Europe, and they know that history is not a given, and they know from their historical experience, remember that Poland as a state disappeared for what, 150 years? Disappeared, being occupied by its neighbors. So they have this historical consciousness deeply embedded, this fact that security is not secure, yeah? And if you were secure, it's because we weren't, yeah? Because all the Ottoman empires and Russian empires came and took over us, and we stopped them or didn't stop them, and whatever, we were the wall protecting you. So they've been clamoring for Western Europeans to wake up. And this has been dismissed until the Russian invasion. And now it turns out they were right. Yeah, and now, for example, Poland is on its way to becoming one of the strongest military powers in the world. Well, you know, relatively speaking, and you know, you can't have, you know, 1 million soldiers as China has, but within its, I mean, Poland has about 50 million inhabitants, but within its size, it is becoming clearly one of the most powerful militaries, or aiming to become one of the most powerful militaries in Europe, conventional military, but now also with the nuclear protection of France. And why? Not because they want to spend money on that, because of the historical imperative, because of the fact that, well, Russia is a current threat. Russia, meaning what? Putin's Russia, is a clear and present danger, to use that expression. Yeah. And Germany needs to finally pick up the tab and to act internationally and militarily, and to behave and to build the capacities that match its economic power. Germany being one of the important economic powers in the world, but not military security powers, and so on and so on. And this takes us back to France and de Gaulle, because this has been basically in many ways de Gaulle's argument since, you know, post World War II and during his presidency of France. And this is why he developed he pushed for an independent nuclear capacity for France. This is why he was continuously mistrustful. Well, not this is why, but this in the context of his deep mistrust of the Anglos, the Anglo-American axis, and so on. So France is sort of, to a good degree, you know, has a an advanced starting point. But even they have to pick up the slack in terms of conventional military capacity, because they have been sort of deconstructing that, because, well, after 1989, everybody thought that peace is forever. We wish, of course we wish. We wish this wouldn't be a necessity, but if you want peace, then you should arm yourself, yeah? Or you should get ready for battle. This doesn't mean militarism. It doesn't mean that anyone wants or prefers war, because war is hell, as famously McCain cited this famous saying. War is hell. War is the worst thing. But the world is the world. The world is not secure. We shouldn't fall on either end. Yeah, pacifism or militarism. Yeah, the world is insecure. We want peace, but we need to build that peace. So that was it, and we'll see each other in the next full episode of the podcast at the beginning of September.